Mike Leach, rest in peace. For most of us, we only got to know you through your interviews and your news conferences. And you seem like an amazing guy, an open guy, an honest guy, a forthright guy, a guy not ashamed or afraid to speak his mind and to just be completely transparent and be yourself. Most importantly, that is backed up and it is emphasized by those who knew you and loved you. So our condolences go out to everyone who knew Mike Leach on a personal basis, his family, his friends, his loved ones. Here at the Voice of College Football, we would encourage you to check out the links that we provide below because we had 2 live streams to interact with you, the college football fan, about Mike Leach's career. So check those out, folks. We get your perspective and a number of people's perspectives, and certainly I shared my thoughts on Mike Leach as he showed himself to be as a human being and also as a football coach. What I want to focus on during this video are 3 aspects of Mike Leach's legacy. And again, we talked more from an intangible aspect and more creatively and eloquently in regards to his impact on the game, but I want to break it down more by the numbers in regards to his impact and his legacy in the record books. First and foremost, his passing offense, the air raid, and of course, the way he picked that up and the way he added his outstanding intellect. It's been stated by a number of people, Lane Kiffin being one of them, that he is just about the smartest guy that many of these people have ever met. So he played football in high school, was recruited and signed at BYU, hurt his ankle, chose to play rugby, but still hung out with the football program. And if you know anything about 80s football, late 70s into the 80s football, you know that BYU passed the ball more and more effectively than anyone by far. Check out the numbers. If you go back to the heyday of Jim McMahon, Robbie Bosco, Steve Young, you will see passing numbers that look like outstanding passing numbers for today. So Mike Leach started his growth process and his wheels started churning under the direction of one Lavelle Edwards. Mike Leach from there formed a tandem with one Hal Mumme, and he was Mumme's offensive coordinator at Iowa Wesleyan, Valdosta State, and Kentucky. Let's focus on the final of those seasons, 1999, in which Tim Couch passed for 4,275 yards in 11 games and made himself, under the tutelage of Mike Leach in 1998, the number 1 draft choice in the NFL. In 1999, Mike Leach moved on to Oklahoma. He coached just 1 season under Bob Stoops, but it was quite impactful. The Sooners had the 11th ranked passing offense in the Big 12 the season prior. For Mike Leach's 1 season, of course, they were number 1 in the Big 12 in passing offense. Then he got his break to coach and direct his own big-time program at Texas Tech. His quarterbacks included Cliff Kingsbury, B.J. Simons, Sonny Cumbie, Cody Hodges, Graham Harrell, Taylor Potts. Those of us who were college football fans at the time remember, and especially stats geeks like me, just seeing eye-popping statistics out of all these quarterbacks on a regular basis, just video game-like numbers that we're not used to seeing even today. Consider that Cliff Kingsbury set 13 Big 12 records, 7 FBS records, and was just the 2nd quarterback in history to pass for over 5,000 yards, joining Ty Detmer. Kingsbury did that in 2002. Then B.J. Simons was the next quarterback who threw for over 5,300 yards in 2003. That was the all-time record. Sonny Cumbie, next in line, led the nation in passing yardage in 2004. His replacement, Cody Hodges, led the nation in passing yardage in 2005. Graham Harrell set 8 NCAA passing records. During the time that Mike Leach was the head coach at Texas Tech for 10 seasons, Texas Tech was in the top 3 in passing offense every one of those seasons except one. 9 of 10 years, top 3 in the nation in passing yardage. Also keep in mind, as we run through these statistics, go year to year through the statistics of the Washington State and Texas Tech quarterbacks and notice that the starting quarterback threw for 4,000 yards, 4,500 yards, but look at the backup quarterback. They typically threw for 1,000 yards, meaning that the total passing yardage figures for the starting quarterbacks at these schools does not in any way show us how dominant and effective and just prolific these passing offenses were under Mike Leach, as he then moved on to Washington State. His quarterbacks there included Connor Halliday, Luke Falk, Gardner Minshew, and Anthony Gordon. Washington State, starting in 2012, when Mike Leach showed up, finished 9th, 4th, 1st, 3rd, 2nd, 1st in passing offense in the nation. They were so dominant in 2015 in passing the football that Washington State not only finished number 1 in the country in passing yards per game, but they finished number 1 by 100 yards per game. If you're noticing a trend here, it's that none of these quarterbacks turned out to be great NFL quarterbacks. He plugged them in season after season after season after season. And based on his tutelage and his development, most of them got a contract in the NFL. But they were lowly drafted or they were free agents and they didn't stick in the league, nor did they become starters. None of them. What they became were 1 to 2 to 3 year backups or practice squad guys or third stringers because Mike Leach's offense worked with all of them. He then moved on to Mississippi State. And at Mississippi State, his quarterbacks were KJ Costello and Will Rogers. In Mike Leach's first game at Mississippi State against LSU in Death Valley, the defending national champion, he brought KJ Costello out from the West Coast, Stanford, to quarterback the Bulldogs. And KJ Costello, in game number 1, with all the intrigue and all the anticipation of a Mike Leach offense, and would it succeed in the SEC? In game number 1, Mike Leach's offense went off for an SEC record 623 yards passing by KJ Costello. Will Rogers turned out to be the better quarterback. And Mississippi State, in its 3 years, 20th, 4th, and 11th in passing yards per game. Now let's look at the quarterbacks that Mike Leach coached and their impact on the NCAA record books. In single game passing, the number 1 all-time record is held by Washington State's Connor Halliday with 734 yards. In fact, of the 19 highest passing game totals in the history of college football, 7 of them were Mike Leach quarterbacks. Then again, let's look at the season totals for these quarterbacks. And keep in mind, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, most of these quarterbacks go season to season. And look, the backup quarterback played significant time and threw for significant yardage. So these season totals are even compromised by how much Mike Leach went to a 2-quarterback system or played the backup significantly. We see here that Mike Leach quarterbacks account for 5 of the top 18 season passing totals in the history of college football. And then for a career led by Graham Harrell as the 4th all-time leading passer in yardage, Mike Leach's quarterbacks account for 2 of the top 8, and Mississippi State's Will Rogers, still playing for the Bulldogs. He currently is way down the list, but project forward. If Will Rogers throws for 4,000 yards this season, he will be the 8th ranked quarterback in the history of career passing yardage. And if Will Rogers somehow throws for 5,000 yards this next season in 2023, he would rank number 3 in all-time passing yardage. And Mike Leach's quarterbacks didn't just throw between the 20s, they put the ball in the end zone, passing touchdowns. Mike Leach's quarterbacks account for 3 of the 10 single-season totals. And in terms of career passing touchdowns, Graham Harrell is number 3 and Luke Falk is number 10. Some offensive gurus, especially the ones that love to throw the football, and most of them do, are accused of sometimes ignoring the rest of the team. But let's look at Mike Leach's impact on Texas Tech, Washington State, and Mississippi State, meaning what were these programs doing? How much were they winning prior to Mike Leach? And then how much did they win after Mike Leach? Let's also consider that despite the just gross, sick passing yardage totals and numbers put up by the quarterbacks coached by Mike Leach, that when he needed to, when he wanted to, go through to see the effectiveness of the ground game under Mike Leach, you might be surprised. He had some mighty fine running backs and some mighty fine ground attacks at these three stops. In fact, after that KJ Costello game against LSU in 2020, in what for Mike Leach was an unsuccessful season, he went to the ground game when Mississippi State won its final three games and won a bowl game to conclude 2020. He wanted to win, and he won more so than his predecessors and his successors at all three stops. First at Texas Tech. Before Mike Leach, good program in the 1990s. We're looking at the 10 seasons prior to Mike Leach. 62-53, that's winning about 54% of its games. Only one top 25 finish in 10 seasons. 1995, number 23. Under Mike Leach. Texas Tech. Folks, this is Texas Tech. When do we ever see Texas Tech in the top 25? Well, basically, never. Never in a final ranking since Mike Leach left. He went 84-43, won 66% of his games. And then his successors, Tommy Tuberville, Cliff Kingsbury, Matt Wells, and now a decent season turned in by Dan McGuire, 78-82. At Washington State, Mike Price took the Cougars to the Rose Bowl in the 2002 season. Then after that, they crashed and burned. Washington State football was winning 3 and 4 games every year. A lot of 3 and 9s and 4 and 8s until Mike Leach. Took him 1 year to transition with a 3 and 9 season, then took him straight to a bowl game and 6 wins, and beyond that, contention in the Pac-12. Only Washington kept Washington State out of the Rose Bowl. The coaches prior to Mike Leach went 29-66 in those 8 seasons, won 30% of their games. Mike Leach won 54% of his games. And again, if you take out that awful season to start out his tenure in which he was transitioning from that deplorable program, he won 58% of his games. Since then, Washington State's one game over 500 at 15-14. The next to last season for Mike Leach at Pullman, they finished in the top 10 in the country at 11-2. On to Mississippi State. Mike Leach wanted a challenge. He went to the SEC, and yeah, that first season was rough. They only won 1 game until into November, and then finished off strong with 3 consecutive wins and a bowl win in the pandemic year. This past season, finished at 7-6, and then nice season here for Will Rogers, Mike Leach, and Mississippi State, and going 8-4. And as Lane Kiffin let us know, he was proud and he was happy that he got to be a part of Mike Leach's last win in his life. At the Egg Bowl, 24-22 over Ole Miss, a ranked team. Mike Leach gets the victory to finish his Mississippi State career at 19-17. The list of current head coaches who worked for or played for or under Mike Leach includes the list of current head coaches who worked and or played for Mike Leach includes some of the most successful in the country. USC's Lincoln Riley, TCU's Sonny Dykes, Josh Heupel of Tennessee, Dave Aranda of Baylor. Just look at that collection of names. You've got a college football playoff participant for the first time in TCU, Sonny Dykes. Tennessee's Josh Heupel. They're 10-2. They're in the Orange Bowl. They're a top 5 to 10 team in the country. Lincoln Riley, of course, we know what he did at Oklahoma and now at USC. Baylor's Dave Aranda won the Big 12 championship and the Sugar Bowl last season. Houston's Dana Hogerson, West Virginia's Neil Brown. Also, Sonny Cumbie, of course, we saw him listed as one of the quarterbacks who piled up yardage and touchdowns now at Louisiana Tech. And, of course, Cliff Kingsbury with the Arizona Cardinals. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. You were one of a kind, both as an intellect and a wit and a humorist and a transparent, regular guy, but also as an innovator, a guy who impacted the passing game, who made it fun for us to watch football, and who made it damn near impossible for defenses to stop your offenses. We will remember you. We will remember your impact on the game. And again, thank you for all that you did for college football.